Hello, everyone. Today we're here on January the 31st, 2020. We're here to remember what happened on January the 31st, 1971. There was actually a massacre down the street in which we don't hear about it in the history books. We don't hear about it in the classrooms. We don't hear about the Mexican American Chicano civil rights movement that took place and how many of us were shot down in the streets and how many of us were arrested and abused by the authorities. Nonetheless, we're here to tell the story so people can know the story. The story is that on January the 31st, 1971, the Chicano Moratorium was held here at this park, and a large group broke away from our group and went down the street to protest against police brutality. You have to remember, this was during a time when Ruben Salazar was shot, but he was shot 4 months before January 1st. Ruben Salazar was shot on August the 29th, 1970, and 4 months after he was shot in protest to the people who were shot on August the 29th, people were protesting the death of Ruben Salazar and two others who died at the demonstration months before. What happened was a large group of the protesters from the Chicano Moratorium Committee went down the street, down here to Arizona, and when they got to Whittier Boulevard, Sheriff Pitches had made an order. Sheriff Pitches ordered that the sheriff shoot above the head of the marchers and shoot at the feet of the marchers. But when the Chicano Moratorium got to Whittier Boulevard, the sheriff opened fire, and they shot directly at the people. 35 people were shot, one dead, and also one died later from his wounds. This is a part of history that we want to tell today. And we're also here to celebrate the National Chicano Day. We call it the National Chicano Day, to tell our story of the sacrifices our leaders made in the past, but also to tell the story about how people actually gave their lives for our civil rights
Felix,
movement.
how are you?
Fine.
Oh, I was going to ask you the other day, but I'm going to ask you today. What happened that day of January the 31st?
Well, I was at the park and everybody decided to go down Whittier Boulevard. By the time I got there, they're already looting and doing stuff already. But the sheriff wasn't there yet when I was there because I was trying to stop a fire. One of the buildings,
There was a fire?
There was a fire. One of the buildings was a salon, I remember. And we broke the window to get the curtain down when they were trying to break into it. So that's why they chased us. Everybody went back towards back to Medic. Then that's when I came back with another friend of mine. We had our hands up, but they grabbed him first. And then when I came back again, that's when they shot me. First bullet hit me in the leg, went through my back. Then that bullet went behind me.
Ooh.
The guy, someone was behind me, about at least about 25 feet.
Oh my God.
And that bullet hit him, so I ran to help him.
The guy got hit in back of you?
It was behind me. And I went to help him out. When I went to try to help him out, that's when everybody jumped on me. And that's where you see a picture of me on the floor like this, on the floor. Everybody thought I was in pain when I wasn't.
Oh,
I was just trying to get away from her because I told her, leave me alone. I'm all right. I'm all right. That's when I came back the third time. I went towards the sheriff. That's when they shot me. That's when hit me here, into my arm.
Oh my goodness! And you have the big old scar there, huh?
Yes.
Wow. And who took you to the? Did the ambulance get there? Did they take you to the hospital?
No, I had no ambulance. Nobody took care of me. There was only two guys that would take care of me.
Wow.
They were my angels there, no. They were the ones that took care
they
of me.
were taking. Thank you for coming down, Felix, and telling me all about it. I always wanted to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
You know, it seems like a lot of people don't have a reference to the Chicano movement, or they don't have knowledge of the history of the Chicano Southwest, and they don't know about the rewards, why we get involved to help the community, because, people, our youth, our kids today, they need jobs for the future, and if we don't fight now, those jobs are not going to be there, and so that's why it's important that we move now.
Yes, it is very important, and it's beginning with education. Everyone, we have to be educated on the movement, and it starts within the schools. They have to talk about it. The families at home have to talk about it. Within the communities, they have to talk about it. And this, when we get more educated, because education is power, knowledge is power. So it would help create jobs down the road, so that way more of the young people would be graduating from high school, from community colleges, college periods, 4-year schools, and be able to go into have more to offer in the workforce.
Well, that's why we're here. You know, we're here to tell the history.
Right.
So many of Raza, especially Raza from Mexico, they don't know the history of Mexico or the history of here. But the history of the Southwest, the Chicano Southwest, is so important. It's local history. We need to learn about the history of the Mexican-American Civil Rights Movement. And that's why we're here today, to tell about the story of what happened on January 31st.
Yes, and get this momentum back and running full steam ahead and not dying out anymore. Keep it going, because the younger generations can use this time to push the agenda forward and to succeed more and have more opportunities in life, and not just settle for, but be able to achieve for more and get more out of life, more value out of life.
Not just that, but thinkers. So we need to create more
Yes.
Chicano thinkers.
Yes, and in the politicians, in the government level, in the educational level, as instructors, just in the police force. We need to have that representation.
Chicano education.
Chicano education, a solid representation.
Every Chicano should be involved in something like this. The Chicano Moratoriums are for that. So many Chicanos could come and know their history. And that's the way it goes through generations. Otherwise, it's going to stop.
Well, you know, it's time. You know, I don't know why Chicano Studies is not here. I guess they're busy reading books, you know, that aren't relevant to the movement history, you know, social science of the Chicano movement.
Yeah,
So it's
that's true.
important, you know, it's more important that we participate, because if we don't participate, things can go bad for the community. Just like the fact that so many Chicanos and Raza were killed over the last 10 years by the police because we were not organized. We did not have a guard. And so that's why more people got involved, right?
That's right. That's right. And this is the only way to do it. Be involved and unite in order for the future generations and these kids that don't know what to do but play games at home. They should be involved in what we're doing so they could help out their community in the future. That's all we need. The identity that they need to be Chicanos, that they need to know that they're Chicanos. And they don't know.
Well, it's time. This is the time. The time
That's
is
right.
now. The future is now. Now is the time to get organized. It's not like, oh, you guys came about at the wrong time. No, we didn't come about at the wrong time. We came about at the right time.
That's
Now
right.
is the time.
That's right. And the movement has to be going on and has to continue. It was almost dying just recently. And now it has to move on and become like the way it used to be when I was young, when I grew up.
Good.
Yep.
Today, January 31st, National Chicano Day, that's an important day for La Raza, you know? Because that's an old, untold story. Nobody knows about it. Nobody knows that
Yes, you're right.
35 people got shot at that day, and 4 were killed, and 1 is here today to even talk about what happened, and he lived it. He got shot and he lived it. Unbelievable. I can't believe it. It's a miracle that he lived, and I thank God for that.
Yes, you're right. Today is a special day, an important day of the Chicano Moratorium and what has happened on January 31st, 1971. It needs to be remembered, it needs to be talked about, and not just with depth to it, the meaning, the significance of what happened, and that we have the honor of having Felix here, the survivor, to talk about it firsthand, of what it was like to be there, to experience it, and the whole thing. And it's important that the history is continuously told, so the younger generations can join us to keep the Chicano power movement going.
Exactly.
It has to. It can't die out.
Exactly.
Also, I'd like to welcome the news media that's here. We have some eyewitness. We're going to talk about January the 31st, 1971, when 35 people were shot on the corner of Whittier Boulevard and Arizona. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to East Los Angeles on this beautiful day, January 31st, 1971. I mean, January 1st, 2020. Anyway, 22. Anyway, I'd just like to remind everybody that the reason why we're here is to remember what happened on January the 31st, 1971, and how there was a massacre that took place. Basically, we had the Chicano Moratorium March. I was co-chairman of the Chicano Moratorium Committee because I was founder of the Brown Berets at the time, so I had power to take that position. The marchers marched across to this location from across the freeway, and then they marched over by the sheriff's station, and then they went over to Whittier Boulevard. But when they got to Whittier Boulevard, Sheriff Pitches gave the sheriff an order that when they do get to Whittier Boulevard, to open fire. But Peter Pitcher said, do not fire, do not shoot at them, shoot over their heads or shoot down at their feet. That did not happen. The sheriff ended up shooting directly at the crowd, shooting 35 people, killing one on the spot, and one died later, and nothing has ever been done about it. This was a massacre. This was a massacre that occurred in East Los Angeles on January 31st, 1971. And we're here to remember that day. We're here to remember the sacrifices of many of our leaders in the community and people who gave their lives. Myself, I was there, and I saw people that were shot. I saw a young man, he took the bullet out of the back of his leg. I saw another one that was dead, and I saw a lot of blood all over the floor. It was terrible. The ambulance came, many ambulances came and took the people to the general hospital. I was out there gathering the names. I gathered 35 names of people who had been shot, and I gave it to a legal organization, a legal group, and they were told by authorities that the shooting was justifiable. This shooting was not justifiable. This was a massacre that took place here in East Los Angeles, and nobody has ever done anything about it. And as a result, all we can do is record history. And this is why we're here, to talk about the history of East LA and how this terrible thing happened. Now I want to introduce some of our eyewitnesses who were there. First, I'd like to introduce Ralph Ramirez. Ralph Ramirez was there at the front. Ralph Ramirez was also one of the ministers of the Brown Berets. Ralph? You want to tell us what happened that day?
On that day, January 31st, about more than 20,000 people gathered at the park on the other side of the 60 freeway. And we listened to speeches. Dr. David Sanchez spoke and a few other speakers. And once that rally was over, about half of that crowd, so perhaps 10,000 people, went on the bridge and crossed over to this side and protested in front of the sheriff's station, which is right over there. And there was a lot of insults coming from the sheriff's deputies and threats, and there was anger, a lot of anger on both sides. And the deputies then came out using their clubs and tear gas and other means, and the crowd dispersed towards, started going south. Towards Whittier Boulevard, and Arizona was one of the widest of those streets, and so a lot of people, they fled down Arizona Street, and at Whittier Boulevard they were met with the sheriff's deputies. Like David was saying, they fired directly into the crowd and killed or wounded 35 people.
You know, unfortunately, most of the history books, you know, are about, in the schools, about white history, but we don't hear about history books about the Southwest, you know, about brown history. And the Southwest has always been very Chicano, very Mexican American, very Native American, but we don't hear about our stories, and that's why we're here to tell the story so we can get over to the schools. The next person I'd like to invite, who was shot twice on January 31st, 1971, was Felix. Felix, want to come up here? Even though Felix was shot several times on the corner of Arizona and Reedy Boulevard, he's still here to start.